Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for tonight's meeting. My name is Lauren Bryant, and I'm the project manager for this exciting project for Boston Parks. We're here tonight to give a little bit of a recap on the Back Bay Fens Pathways project, but we're really here to focus on the Evans Way Bridge portion of the project. Before we jump in, I just want to give you a few how-tos and what to expect tonight. Next slide, please. We did not have any requests for interpretation, so tonight's meeting will be in English only. We want to be able to hear all voices and are able to offer translation and interpretation services as requested free of charge. So please reach out to me if you'd like to request this for future meetings. My email address is Lauren, Lauren .Bryant, Bryant @boston.gov. And as soon as I'm done talking, I'll pop that in the chat for everyone. I also want to make sure that you know that tonight's meeting is being recorded, and that will be available on the project website within about a week. And in case you haven't had a chance to check out the project website yet, it's boston.gov/fens-pathways, and we'll stick that in the chat as well. And we know that not everybody can attend these meetings. So in case you have any friends or neighbors who weren't able to join us tonight, please share what you learn and also direct people to the project website because they'll be able to review the recorded meeting and the presentation as their schedule allows. We also want to know that we really want to hear everybody's thoughts. That's why we're here tonight. The community is incredibly important to us. You guys know this park and love it. So that's why we're here, to be able to engage with you. And so we'll be sharing a presentation that will have 3 conceptual design ideas for the Evans Way Bridge. And in order for you to be able to see all of those and to be able to make some comparisons, we're going to share all 3 of them, and then we'll open it up for conversation so that everyone can really have a sense of all of the ideas. And then we can go back to any of those different concepts during that discussion portion. But if a question pops up during the presentation, please feel free to add it to the chat. I know sometimes I forget things whenever we're going through, so please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll make sure to answer that during the discussion period. And please, use only the chat for comments and questions related to this project. If you aren't familiar with Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a bubble for chat, and that will allow you to do that. And then once we're opening it up for the discussion portion, we'd love to hear from people and have people be able to unmute themselves. So please click on the reactions icon at the bottom, and you should be able to raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to speak, and then we can unmute you. Hopefully that's all the housekeeping, and we could jump to the next slide.
I'm trying to advance it, but okay, there you are.
There we go. Thanks, Miguel. So our agenda tonight, we'll introduce the project team. We're going to do a very quick recap of the Pathways project, just so people know where we are, what we've been working on behind the scenes. And then the majority of this meeting tonight is going to be the presentation of the conceptual bridge design. And then we'll jump into that listening and discussion session we talked about. And so we can go to the next slide. And I think, Miguel, if you just hit enter, I think it should go.
I think
or the right arrow.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Oh, there we go. So for those who may not have joined right at the beginning, my name again is Lauren Bryant. I'm the project manager for this project for Back Bay Fens, both the Pathways project and the Evans Way Bridge portion of the project. Very excited to work on this. Kyle Zick, who you probably have seen at our other meetings if you've been involved this whole time, is the landscape architect for the Pathways project and is also overseeing the Evans Way Bridge portion as well in the collaboration. And we're thrilled to have Miguel Rosales here from Rosales Partners to be the person that's doing our conceptual bridge design with us. So we're thrilled, and then I will stop talking here because that's all of my portion, and I will turn it over to Kyle.
All right, thanks, Lauren. So the next slide, we're going to just have a recap of the project in general. And I appreciate seeing so many familiar faces and names, people who have come to a number of the meetings, maybe all 7 even, that we've had so far in the past couple of years. And we started with a site assessment in the summer and the fall of 2022. And we had our first site walk. That was our first community meeting in October of 2022. And then we continue to have design meetings in the winter of 2023. And then we had a series of focused meetings in the spring of 2023, based on certain topics: the Victory Garden, the Pathways, War Memorial, Evansway Bridge, and the O'Reilly Monument. So since then, we haven't just put our pencils down. We've kept working, because ultimately what we're trying to do is take those design ideas and turn them into documents that we can get permitted from Boston Landmarks and from the Boston Conservation Commission. So that's been our primary task, and that's what we're shooting to do, to have those submitted to those 2 departments or agencies this fall. And there'll be public meetings with both of those submissions, so you'll have a chance to comment on the more detailed drawings. Now, the Pathway project, as you know, is on a separate track because it's funded, and it's a separate track from the Evansway Bridge, which has CPA funding, but it's not full funding for the design and construction. So that's why we're having this special meeting tonight to talk about the conceptual designs for the Evansway Bridge. That will help us focus and hopefully narrow down the number of concepts from 3 to hopefully 1. We've already had a preliminary conversation with the Boston Landmarks Commission, but we haven't, done any formal submittal because that's premature at this point. But we wanted to get their input. So I mentioned the Pathway project is funded $6.3 million, and our hope is that after we get approval from Landmarks and from the Conservation Commission, we would go out to bid this winter and be able to start construction in 2025. That could be spring or summer, depending on the actual timing of our approvals. And the only other approval we have to get is through Boston Water and Sewer for the stormwater management. So then I mentioned the Evansway Bridge is on a separate track. Miguel's challenge was to design bridge options that could be built for $1.2 million. And you'll see tonight that he's done that. And he's been able to get into it enough detail, or prepare these drawings with enough detail to be able to really understand that. The timeline really is not determined yet for the Evansway Bridge because of the funding. We may come out of this meeting and have clear direction, and then just think about, all right, how are we going to fund everything? Come up with the rest of the money for design and construction, or it may take some time. So I think that's a recap and also kind of where we are going in terms of next steps. Then a little bit of a recap just on the Pathway project so you don't forget. I mean, ultimately, these are larger park and recreation goals, but they are totally applicable to this project. We're trying to make the pathways accessible and available to all. And the good thing, we've been able to make some adjustments that will feel very subtle in the landscape, but make big improvements from an accessibility standpoint. And we're coordinating that also with DCR so that we have accessible routes into the park, because you have to cross DCR property to get to the Boston Park. And then acknowledging that, we have diverse, balanced, and efficient mix of uses. And as you know, within Back Bay Fens, we have sports, we have passive uses, we have gardens, both ornamental and the Victory Gardens. Hopefully by having as many meetings as we've had, you agree that we've had meaningful and inclusive community engagement. And we're not done. I think there will be future meetings, as I said, for Landmarks and CONCOM, but I would imagine also for the Evansway Bridge. When we're in a landscape like this, particularly around the Muddy River, we have to think about how the landscape can be adaptive and resilient because of climate change, sea level rise. And then the Pathway project is all about connections to DCR property, connections across the parkways or Park Drive to community assets, landmarks, and other circulation corridors. Next slide. And I think, oh yeah, just one more for me. Just as a reminder, and I've already mentioned it, the red highlighted paths, those are the ones that DCR owns. So basically everything that bounds the perimeter of the park, including along Agassiz Road. And then the gold color paths are the ones that the city of Boston owns. And we won't redo every one of those paths as part of this project, but we've looked at every single one. And we'll be addressing any of the deficiencies in terms of the materials, the width, accessibility, so that we have, a really complete and comprehensive project when it's done. All right, so thank you. And I think the next slide, Miguel will start talking about the bridge.
Yes, thank you, Cal and Lauren. I'm Miguel Rosales, and I'm the principal of Rosales and Partners. And we're a firm that specializes on bridge design, and we are based here in Boston. In terms of the agenda, I will do a small introduction, show you some of our projects that are local here in Boston and around Boston, and then talk about 3 bridge design concepts. Each of these concepts have a cost of approximately 1.2 million. So, we are within the range that the city wanted to keep them at, and they are very different. So, they have different qualities and different ways to approach the crossing. So, we'll be very much looking forward for your input. And then we'll talk about next steps. Just to give you an introduction of my work, I've been here in Boston since 1997, and I actually have worked on 10 different bridges in the Boston area, which is, very exciting for me. Some of them are complete, and some of them are in design or in the planning. Including the Harbor Bridge, the Appleton Bridge, the Longfellow, the Lever Circle, the Museum of Science bridges, the MBTA Drop 1 bridge, which is the new bridge that is currently being designed right now next to North Station, the second bridge, the Charleston North Washington Street Bridge, which is actually in construction and it should open next spring, the Northern Avenue, and the Alford Street Bridge. These are some images. As you know, we work very closely with DCR and Mass DOT on the Appleton Bridge and the Longfellow Bridge, which was a restoration, and this project were done together. We also won a competition for the lighting of the Harbor Bridge, which has not been implemented, and this was done for the Charles River Conservancy. In terms of pedestrian bridges, we have worked with the Museum of Science and DCR on connecting Cambridge to Boston, and we have proposed pedestrian bridges both at the garage to the Museum of Science and also over the canal, so you'll be able to go from Boston to Cambridge, and also a new bridge at Lever Circle that will connect to the train station. And on the area of North Station, we are working on the MBTA new bridge that will cross the Charles River, and it will expand, all the train system into North Station. We work on the second bridge and also on the new North Washington Street Bridge, which is in construction and it should open next spring. And you can cross it now, but we're still doing all the finishing touches. And then 2 more proposals we did for the City of Boston. One is for a suspension bridge that will replace the Northern Avenue Bridge, at the seaport, and another proposal for a new entrance bridge at Alford Street, that will connect to Encore and all of the area of the Everett and create a new gateway into the city. Now we going to explain about the Evans Way Bridge. I think this bridge is small compared to some of the other bridges I'll show you, but it's a very important crossing because it's been missing for a long time and it's very well integrated into the path system. So I think that makes it critical, for its replacement. As you know, it's located at one corner of the park and it's very close to the Museum of Science and the Isabella Gardner Museum. And it has been missing probably since the 70s, 80s. And it used to be part of 2 other bridges, Middle Bridge and the North Bridge. Those exist. They are a little bit narrow and not as adequate as they could be. But we're trying when we do the replacement of the Evans Way Bridge, we're going to try to make a wider bridge, probably more attractive bridge and something that will work very well. Here you can see some images of the bridge prior to the demolition. You can see they had, 2 wood supports on the river and the current conditions. Right now, the whole bridge has been completely demolished and there is nothing existing there. You can only see the abutments. So, many people try to walk to the bridge and try to cross. And of course, you only get, the abutment, you're not able to do that. So we're trying to fix that in the future. And I think it will be a perfect connection, to all the system of paths, along the entire park. It's another of the views. The existing bridges, that were built a long time ago in the 30s were wood bridges, and they didn't last, and probably there was not a lot of maintenance, over the years, and the material was, very fragile, so they completely disappeared. And some of them were replaced, later in the 70s. But the site is absolutely beautiful. You can see the landscaping. You almost feel like you are outside Boston, somewhere in the countryside. And if it were not, for some noise from the cars, it would be completely peaceful. So it's a very, very nice location for a bridge. These are some of the bridges that existed there. They were truss bridges, and they were wood, and they were very small spans. The new bridge that we're going to propose is going to cross the entire river, which is very important, for environmental reasons and to not impede, the water system that is underneath of the Muddy River, and there will be, longer spans. All of these bridges have disappeared. There's nothing exists of them. But I thought one of the concepts could be inspired with some of these designs, and you will see that in one of the concepts. Then these are more recent bridges that replace the old wood bridges. These were done in the 1970s. They're basically concrete bridges that have a fascia of stone. I mean, I think they were trying to mimic some of the historic bridges, in the Fenway, but it's basically just a facade. Some issues with these bridges is that they are rather narrow, and not very good for, crossing in a wheelchair, for example. And the railings are also rather tall. So that's also that, doesn't work quite well. These bridges were completed, I would say, taking inspiration from the Esplanade, probably. And here are some of the details. I would say that some of the detailing could have been better, especially in terms of the railing. But they have lasted, and they are useful. In the photo on the bottom, you can see that the railings are very tall. I think close to 50 feet, 50 inches, and that makes it a little bit of blocking some of the views that you can see from them. These are solid bridges that could be a source of inspiration. These ones are in the Fenway, in the Esplanade, and they're also concrete structures. They are arches or beams in some way, and they are wider and probably have a better system of railings. They are more simple, more transparent than the one that exists on the Fenway, and they are wider. I think in the future bridge over the Evans Way, we want to make it also at a certain width. We're thinking about 10 feet minimum, because that would allow to have circulation in both directions. I think the location is very important and also perfect, because already have a crossing there and then connects, into the park, and many people are going to use it in the future. I'm sure about that. So, it would really make a huge connectivity in terms of the whole park. It's another view from the air. This will be in plan. As part of this project, we'll also try to do some improvements to the access to the bridge itself, and that will be done as part of the landscape, part of the project in terms of the paths. It basically will be in the same location where it was in the many years ago. Here are some more photos of the existing condition. You can see one side of the crossing is a little bit higher than the other side. We are going to make it ADA accessible, and we are going to, modify some of the grading so you can have a very smooth connection between the two. The bottom slides were taken in the winter, and at that time you can see the concrete abutments, and those will be completely removed, and we will make a new foundation, but it will be basically in the same location. And we already have done some of the borings, the geotechnical borings, so the project, is progressing. After the conceptual design is selected, the three that we have proposed, and we have gone through some of the reviews, then we can proceed into the 30% preliminary design. Some other photo of the site. And, I was always surprised how many people try to walk and cross, and they always stop at the end. It's a very common view when I was, walking and reviewing the site. So let me show you the first concept. This is a similar concept to the bridges that exist right now, but it's done in steel instead of concrete. It's a much longer span, and it's 10 feet wide. In this case, what we're doing is that we're doing a beam a steel box system that will cross the entire waterfront, the entire river. And it has a span of about 70 feet, but altogether it's about 122 feet. So it's, considerably longer than the other two bridges that exist there. In this case, we have used vertical pickets for the railings, and we're trying to make them as transparent and simple as possible. And we have done special terminations, at the end. I have modified the profile to make it very smooth and clean, and it's complying with ADA, but also has an attractive in terms of the curvatures. Here's the cross section. The railings will be 42 inches minimum. That's what we will propose. And we also will have a handrail, at the lower height, especially for children or people that are on a wheelchair. And the width that is effective will be 10 feet. And you can see here the steel box system with a concrete deck on top. The steel box will be prefabricated off-site in a factory and brought to the site, and we'll be able to install it in one swoop. So it will be, a very efficient way to cross the river, and then we'll have, concrete abutments. It's another view of it from the side. Very light, very transparent. It's a simple but elegant structure that is inspiring some of the existing bridges in the area. You can see here how the curvature of the profile works. I worked very hard on achieving that, also through ADA, and also so when you cross, you have this feeling of a little of a Japanese bridge, that goes in traditional historic gardens. It's another view from the side. The colors of the structure we haven't decided. I first would like to make a selection of the concept, and then we will do studies of color, and the photo montages using the real photography. And I think that we could play it in different directions. You could make it, try to blend with the landscape, to completely try to disappear, or you could highlight it and make it more visible, depending on how light you want to do the structure. I think right now the bridge is a little bit hidden, but there will be some clearance that need to happen. We'll have to remove some of the trees and some of the vegetation to be able to build this structure. And then you'll be able to see it much better, from any of the paths or anything or the approach in the location. These are some of the structural calculations we already have done. We did all of this because we wanted to make sure that we had a good cost estimate. So all of the quantities of materials, so concrete, the foundation, the steel box was all calculated, and that's why we're able to get to the budget that we feel comfortable that will be within the $1.2 million range. The concept 2 is slightly different. This one has also an arch inspiration, but actually these are two real steel arches, and they have concrete abutments that are further back, from the closer to the river. This type of structure is more, I would say, more contemporary, more avant-garde in some way, because it's using a stress ribbon system, which means that we'll have a steel ribbon going over the arch, and there will be precast planks that will be attached to the steel ribbon. So, it's a very innovative type of crossing, because what happens is that the load of the arch, when you have an arch, it always tries to open up. And then the pull of the catenary on the other direction compensates and balances the loads, in here. So that makes it quite efficient and quite easy to maintain and, and build. Again, in this case, we'll have two narrow steel arches, and those will also be prefabricated off-site and brought to the location for installation. The railing is the same height, and we have the same width of crossing, 10 feet. It's another view. Here, I'm using horizontal lines instead of pickets. I think the horizontal lines goes better with this concept, but that's something that could be changed. I mean, the railing design is interchangeable, and I also have done a different termination, which I think is very important for welcoming people, into the crossing. This type of railing, in this case, I'm showing cables. So, it's very light and transparent compared to the pickets, and I will have a little more of a presence. Another view, the profile is the same, with the same curves and the same smoothness going from one side to the other. And, we also make sure that people that are in a wheelchair will have nice views. So that's why, we model it in that way. This is the view, from the side. And how the structure works, with these two arches, and then you can see the steel ribbons going underneath and going over the arches. And I'll show you the concept 3. This one it's a completely different approach. This one is a truss, but it's a curved truss. And I'm trying to take inspiration from the old wood bridges, but this bridge was going to be done in steel. And the truss will be brought to the site completely fabricated and put in the installation of the crossing. And then we will do the deck afterwards. But the whole steel structure will already be constructed. This is a view of it. I think it's a gracious way to cross. One refinement that we could do in this structure will be maybe lower slightly the upper core of the arch. That's something that we have studied. And if this concept is selected, we could probably do that. So you have a little bit of better views from that location. This one, of course, is a longer span because the whole truss is the structure itself. So it goes to about 93 feet compared to 71 and 80 that was in the other concepts. Similar clearance also. You can see here, location. This one will have a corrugated metal system, where you can put the concrete on top. So, basically trying to make also not only the surface for walking, but also the surface, for pouring the concrete. So that's why the cost can stay low. The view from the side. Another view. What I was saying is that, one refinement that we could do is lower slightly this upper core of the truss. So it's about the same height as the railing. I think that probably will improve it if this concept is selected. Many of these trusses are very rudimentary and very functional, and you can see many prefabricated trusses, built in the United States. But this one, I think, will be more elegant because it will have the curvatures, and the curvatures go with the profile. So it will make it a little bit more elegant and lighter. Here's the view of the calculations. And then you can see the three together. I think any of them, could be appropriate for the site and it could work well. And I'll be happy with any of them. It's really, what this client wants to do and, what other input we'll have from the community and from the agencies. They're about the same cost. So I think the cost is not a factor here. It's mainly the appearance and the functionality and how do you feel it will feel in the site. It's another view, from the air. And we can go back to, any of the concepts if you would like to. And there's another view. You can see the three together. So I think that's the end of the presentation, and we'll be able to answer any questions or comments. Everything will be welcome.
Thank you so much, Miguel. So again, like Miguel said, we can go back and look at any of them. Do we have any questions or any comments? Karen, I see that your hand is raised. Shauna, could we unmute or let Karen unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. Hi.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm a little dark here. I don't have another light in this room. I just want to say, thank you so much. This bridge has been missing for a long time. And I know the community is very excited about it. I'm constantly worrying someone blind is going to walk off down that path. And, anyway.
And I think that's a really good comment that you had in the chat. And one of the things that it's getting a little bit too into the weeds, but Kyle and I are looking at, as part of the Pathways project, maybe doing some of the prep in terms of some of like the view shed clearing and some of the invasive management. And so that will only open that up a little bit more, which means people might come down there more. So Kyle, maybe we could look at some kind of a temporary something at the end that maybe has like a phase 2 coming soon, bridge, but then that would at least, give some kind of a visual.
Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. I want it to be visual and I want somebody able to hit it with a cane.
Right. No, yeah, that's a great comment.
Because when we had the fog sculptures up there, people also now they walk around on their phones. They don't actually look where they're going. And so anyway, but I just wanted to say, I am glad to see this proceeding. I'm very excited about, I know many of your bridges, Mr. Rosales, and I think many of them they're so lovely. And I'm very excited that you guys have worked out a budget that doesn't seem, I mean, it's high, it's more than we have so far, but it's really not, I don't think it's impossible. And I'd really look forward to, you know, I think Lauren, you know, we talked with, I'd love to work to fundraise and do what we can do to make it work. I also like the idea of a lot of it being potentially fabricated off site, because then you don't have to disturb, you know, the public as much, and you might be able to just deliver something. This area has had so much disruption for years with the Muddy River restoration, and then we're going to do tree pruning, and then, you know, the city of Boston's going to do path work. It has just been over and over and over. I don't want to take up all the space here, but I did want to also mention, you know, I love I mean, I think there is an advantage if you don't have more posts in the river, right? Because the more stuff you put in the river, it's bad for, you know, the environment and materials sloughing off over time. That's really exciting. I hadn't thought about that environmental advantage potentially. But then of course, you know, your span gets longer, and I appreciate that you want it to be ADA and smooth as possible. I think one thing that we're all very sensitive about, and I know you guys know this, is, you know, where the landings are, if there be any impact on trees, and if it would be any, you know, what the, you know, how we can make sure that the least amount of, you know, landscape, historic landscape, or important trees, or, you know, all trees are important. But, you know, we want to make sure we're protecting that. And I know we're doing actually a pretty detailed tree health survey right now. For those of you that are out there in the park, you may be seeing, we're out there surveying the health of all the trees right now. If you have any questions, Jack Schleifer, who works here at the Conservancy and is on here, we can separately talk about those things. I do appreciate that it's wider than the existing bridges, because I think the existing bridges are so narrow, it's almost challenging. I understand not wanting it to be super wide, because you don't want all the cars and vehicles and everybody on it all the time. And I know, you know, there's some interest in not having bicycles zooming all around the interior of the Fens. But I do appreciate, I think if we do, when this bridge gets done, I think everyone's going to want us to replace the other two smaller ones too, because they feel so small. What else did I want to ask? Trees, you know, I would love to hear people's thoughts. I mean, I think what's really lovely about these is you're not, you know, and I, you know, thank you. I haven't seen them, of course. I know that so the bridges were not original to the park, but there's been the last one was wood. Of course, it didn't last. It did, I guess, I don't know. I've heard a variety of stories. Did it get burned down? What happened? I think my question is, you know, is there a scenario where we do wood, or is it better to do something like steel that lasts? I think that there's a value in that. And is that what that, you know, material decision was based on? And I think these actually look very clean and quite elegant. And I think follow the Secretary of Interior guidelines for historic preservation, that they have to look of their time, and building fake historic things is not correct. But I know that sometimes our landmark commission or historic commission have interpretations that you know, I don't always understand. So, but we think that that these kinds of things are this kind of material and look would be acceptable. I guess I'm done.
Oh, yeah, there were a couple things in there, Karen, and you're absolutely right. The concern with the wood and not wanting to build a new bridge and have it burned down again is exactly the rationale for the material. But yeah, we've had this conversation before about those standards, and you know, how Boston Landmarks interprets those. But we did show these three to the Landmarks Commission before coming to the community as a staff level conversation, because we didn't want to show the community anything that would, you know, raise red flags. And they were very comfortable with us showing these to the community. So I take that as a very positive direction.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to hear others' thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all good comments. Anyone else want to jump in? Sarah, let's see. Are you able to unmute?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everyone. Very exciting to see some actual bridge options over that long-term gap. I have two questions. One, and they're kind of superficial. I appreciate Karen covered the functional aspects. On concepts 1 and 2, the railing where it ends is curved. One a little sharp, well, maybe similarly kind of oval. And on the third one, it comes to a point. And when I look at them all together, that point seems out of place. Maybe I've internalized too much that Olmsted didn't like right angles and things were more meandering. But otherwise, I love number 3 just to look at it. My other question is you mentioned color, and it's kind of hard to picture, like, do they color the concrete or the steel or both, or how would that work?
I mean, in terms of the railing, I think that, the railing termination is really not part of the structural system. So, there is flexibility there. I think my thinking about the truss was because it's a truss and it has a lot of, kind of triangulations and angles. I was trying to keep it like that, and I was just round in the very end, but I think that could be studied, more carefully. The steel, it has to be coated, with probably a 3-coating system, for durability. So we are going to have a color anyway on the steel. And the concrete, usually we will add a stain to the concrete just to unify the concrete system and, make it more smooth. So there is a possibility to have, different colors. I think that would be part of the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you look at, for example, the Appleton Bridge, we decided to do a dark gray-green color because we wanted to blend with the trees in the esplanade. And that was intentional because that's an overhead bridge, and we didn't want the bridge to be overwhelming over the park. In this case, I think it's a different condition. We're not going over the park, we are crossing the river, and maybe a lighter color will help to make it more visible, from a distance. So I think that's something that we can study once the concept is selected.
Miguel, or Marie, are you able to unmute?
Yes. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much. This is really exciting. I have to say, I remember the first presentation having something very modern that scared me a little bit. And we were just speaking conceptually. So I think to see these, it's nice to get up to where we are. I was a little surprised at the material, but I understand the benefits of the steel. And I guess, I'd love to know what Elena thinks, because if I remember, she was responsible for quite a bit of the fundraising and the CPA funding, and I see that she's on the call, so I don't want to make my comments go in front of hers. But I love of concept 2, the curve, because you see that same curve from other areas of bridges in the Back Bay Fens. At the same time, I do like the concept of 3 and how that goes back to the bridge styles that we saw previously. The one question that I have a couple of questions about any of the plans. Sorry, first going to concept 3, my recollection is that you said that the system would be longer. Is that correct? And for any of these 3, on the exterior portion where it exits out toward the corner of the museum school and Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Evans Way, do you anticipate big changes for that point of connection at the path, or needing? No, I see that there's a
No,
lot.
I mean, if we go back to the, let me see. No, it will be basically the same size. that exists right now. I mean, the apartments will be about the same location. I don't see
Okay.
any big difference. And it just, the spans are about the same if you go from railing in to another railing in. It's just that because where the supports are, that changes, but the overall length of the bridge is probably the same for all of them. It's just, where the arches land or where the beam lands or where the truss land. In case of the truss in concept 3, you can go longer because you're basically spanning the whole river and you are bringing the truss, connecting end to end. For example, in number 2, the spans are a bit smaller because I'm making an arch and then I'm making an opening, for the abutment. But the overall length of the bridge is about the same. That doesn't change.
Great. And I think the only comment that I guess is negative is when I saw the bridge railing in number 1 at the point of the start, it kind of made me think of an airport. And I thought, oh, I'd like to see it be a little bit, I don't know, a little bit more appropriate for a historic landscape. Yeah, but I think I was concerned about the area exiting out towards Evans Way just because there's been a lot of tree loss in that area. The landscape looks pretty harsh. There's not a lot of plantings. And I think it could stand to be improved maybe even outside of this project. So I didn't know if there'd be further incursion. But thanks so much. Looking forward to it.
Allison, let's see, can you unmute?
Yes, it worked. Thank you so much.
Hi, of course.
Hi. And I like too, as well. I like that arch. So I have a couple questions, and I did sign on late because of the crazy traffic that's out there because of the Orange Line shutdown. Anyway, I think, Miguel, you said the budget would be the same for all 3, and did I
So
hear you say
approximately the same, it's not exactly the same cost, but it's in the range of 1.2 million.
1.2 million? Okay, so I guess, did I miss the opening explanation of the city's funding for this? Is there obviously is a need to fundraise outside of the city budget. Is that correct, Lauren?
Correct, yes. So there is some funding through CPA. And then what the thought is that once we have the final conceptual design, we'll have a better sense of exactly what that budget is. Plus, we'll also have beautiful renderings that Miguel is going to produce for us as well, that will be able to help with fundraising. And I know that Miguel also has been very helpful in talking to us about grants that are out there, that he thinks that this project could be a really good candidate for. And so we do have some ideas of where some of that additional funding can come from, but it is not fully funded right now for construction. But we do have some
Right.
construction budget.
Okay, and then what actually is the timeline for the project then?
That's what's tricky. So I think that's really going to be determined once we have that final conceptual design and we know how the fundraising is going. So I think that how the funds are, how quickly we can get those funds will help us determine how quick we can get the project done.
Great, great.
But from
Okay.
a design perspective, we should be done with the design, I would think, by spring. Feels about right. Miguel, tell me if I'm totally off on that.
Well, I think that the next step will be to do the 30% design. And after the 30%, we'll have a much better cost estimate, and we'll have technical drawings and technical plans. And then from that, you can stop there, or you can go into the final design, and that will take a few more months to complete the final design before we go to construction. But I would say at 30%, that would be a good time to do the fundraising. We'll have actual plans. We'll have a more detailed budget. Some of the details will be worked out also. I think that would be a good timing.
Okay, and so am I remembering this, that the city actually only allocated about less than 500,000, or am I wrong on that?
Currently on the bridge, there's no capital funding on it. It's CPA funding currently. That
That's
doesn't
it.
mean that
Okay.
right, because we don't know what the bridge is going to cost yet. So that doesn't mean that we won't be adding capital funding to it. It's just that without a number and without a design, we don't have that funding right now because they like to put it in specific years. So once we know
Right.
that, we'll be able to look at where all of those different funding options are.
Okay, okay. And one more thing before I sign off
course.
with the point about one riverbank being higher than the other. I wasn't completely clear on which side. I'm assuming the side closer to Evans Way is higher. Is
Yeah,
that
near,
right?
yeah, near the museum is slightly higher. Yeah.
Right. So Marie's point about new landscaping needed there, that could be accomplished with this project as part of the regrading,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Okay. And the pathway on the other side, of course, is staying the same with the promenade with the London plane trees. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And Allison, one more point in terms of the schedule that you were asking about. So when Kyle was just talking about earlier in the presentation, actually, you may not have been on for it, that with the Pathways project, the next phase that we're doing right now is the permitting in terms of Landmarks and Conservation Commission. And the bridge is not part of that. So we've talked to both of those organizations separately as a staff level conversation. So they know that this project is coming. But in addition to those 30% drawings that Miguel was talking about, once we have a final conceptual design, we are going to need to go and do the official permitting through Landmarks and Conservation Commission for the bridge. And so that also we'll have to look at the timing of all of those hearings as well in terms of that schedule.
Okay. And the Conservation Commission would have they would like the longer span, I'm assuming, without abutments into the water. Is that the reason for the longer span?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But
All right.
just to be clear, though, we don't have abutments in the water in any option.
In any of these three.
Right.
Yes.
They all have the longer span than the former bridge. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great
Thanks.
comments. Genevieve, are you able to unmute?
Hi, yes, can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, can you go back to the other slide that has the 3 concepts? Yeah, I think that one. Hi, everyone. I'm Genevieve Day. I'm the co-executive director of the Fenway Alliance. We are the 21 cultural, educational, and artistic institutions, the consortium in the Fenway, including, of course, the MFA, SMFA at Tufts, and Gardner Museum. So we're very interested in this bridge project. We're very excited to see these designs. And really, I just wanted to come on and say they look amazing. And I wanted to say that my favorite bridge concept is number 2. I love the way the curves in it. It looks like traditional and modern at the same time. And I love how you can like see through between the platform and the curve of the support system. As Sarah mentioned, there's a nice reflection in the water. And I just think it looks with the curves, it looks really modern, but it also kind of also doesn't like stand out in the same way. I feel like bridge concept number 3 is like a little intense. So yeah, I just wanted to come on and say these look great. And my favorite is bridge concept 2. And I also really like the horizontal, like the more visibility through the railings. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us. And I don't think I see anybody else's hands raised. Does anyone else have any thoughts or questions, comments? And Marie, thank you for adding in the comments in the chat too. And yes, in case we didn't say this, this bridge is still going to be pedestrian only. So we are not going to have vehicular load on this. There won't be places, our maintenance vehicles won't be traveling over it, even though it's wider. And we will be having signage that says, that this is not meant for bikes. Obviously, we are not going to necessarily have somebody standing out there at all times, but it will be signed for that. So just wanted to clarify that as well. Looked like somebody raised their hand and then put it back down. If you still want to say something, please put that back up.
I just want to clarify, Lauren, that when we do the calculations, we still have to calculate if a truck will go over, just because if there's an accident or something like that and people don't know, but that's part of the calculation and that's part of the cost.
Absolutely. You're right. So if a vehicle accidentally went over it or went over it when it wasn't supposed to, so it's not going to hurt the bridge. That's a very good point, Miguel. Yes. I think we probably will do something like bollards or something, but yes, it's a good clarification. Let's see, Adam, are you able to unmute? Adam, can you hear me? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, so you just answered my question. I was just going to ask about bikes going over the bridge.
Okay.
And yeah, I was wondering, if you could just give me a little bit more insight into just the perspective of bikes in the park generally. I know Karen had mentioned something about that before, about kind of not wanting bikes zooming around the park. And I guess, I see the Fens as like having the potential to also be a really good kind of bike highway in a way, through a part of the city that doesn't really have great bike infrastructure otherwise. So I guess how do you balance the Fens being kind of a place where you don't have bikes zooming all around you, but also serving the needs of people who are biking around, which is more people are biking every day here in the city. You see it around.
Exactly. No, it's a really great question. And, we obviously want to encourage biking and less cars. And so it is really challenging. The history of the Fens has really been a calm, passive park. And so we really are trying to keep with that. It's what the master plan had wanted for this space to be much more calm. We do have an issue, even though it's currently the way that the park is, the pathways is that the outer pathway, which actually is DCR owned, like Kyle was talking about earlier, is the pathway that bikes are allowed on. The inner pathway, they never have been, even though bicyclists do use that. So I think that one of the things is that we've heard a lot in the earlier community meetings for this project that there have been a lot of bike accidents, people hurt, people feeling unsafe walking in the Fens because of people who aren't supposed to be there that are riding their bikes very fast. So it is a challenge, and we're looking at it from a safety perspective. We also are looking at the fact that outer pathway will still be bikes, and there will be crossings at Agassiz now with what the DCR is doing. And so there will still be some cut throughs that won't be through the park. So we really are trying to preserve that peaceful feel in the park. So I know that it's not perfect, and there are people who are going to want bikes and people who don't want bikes, but we're erring on the side of safety for pedestrians. So hopefully that helps answer it a little bit. Karen, are you able to unmute?
I am.
Thank
you. I do want to just say I really appreciate the last question, because I it's very challenging. I want there to be amazing spaces to bike and walk the entire Emerald Necklace safely, and there's a lot of places that are not great for pedestrians and bicyclists and cars and birds and fish. And I would love it if, and one of the things that we've been trying to do at the Conservancy is work with DCR to try and make better crosswalks all across the parkways. Calm traffic sometimes is going way too fast, and potentially create bike lanes, either in the parkways if possible, or in appropriate parts of the park. I think there's a real balancing act, though, because I have also heard from a lot of community members a concern about bicyclists sort of zooming through the park and causing those issues. And Lauren, we've talked about this a lot. I would love to make sure that the Agassiz Road project, or whatever happens there, could really accommodate bikes, etc. And I encouraged folks when that was reopened to try and test some of those things. And DCR said they would, and then they haven't. And I hear that maybe there will be, but I worry that sometimes there's a lot of promises, because I do want us to find space, good, safe space and options for different types of modes, because yeah, we say as a society we want to get people out of their cars, but then I know there's a lot of different pieces to work out. So I don't know if I'm really saying too much, except that I hear the last person's concern. I also know that there are concerns in the park, and to whatever extent, I've been able to help, and we've been able to sort of bring DCR and parks and others together to try and move some of those forward. I'd really like to help, because if we are going to try and make some safer crossings along Agassiz, I think we need to do it and move forward with it. And I worry that it just kind of doesn't move forward.
Yeah, and I know that you talk to them quite a bit too, Karen, but I'll also bring that up in the next conversations that we have with them, to just say, hey, this came up again at our bridge meeting, and there's the concern with, how these projects are coordinating or not. So I can bring that back up with them as well. And I think another thought, or just another point to Adam's question, we also know that, this is a huge circulation path, and we want to respect that too. So one of the things that we've also been talking about is the possibility of having some signage at some of those cross-throughs which do go over the bridges that say, please dismount bike. And so, not to say, like, if you're a biker, like, come through the park, but because of the speeds and the concern, so, dismount and walk the bike through, or walk the bike over the bridge. So those are some of the things that we've been talking about, whether that's a potential as well. So
I wanted to just, one other thing that I had meant to mention was that I know when we talked at one time, we would like to have all the pathways in the park redone. I know only some of them are City of Boston parks, the exterior ones, and then a lot of the crosswalks that are, and the connections right up to the curb and then over to the MFA, for example, are not great. Many of those are within the state jurisdiction. And I know at one point we talked about, in order to do all of that work, maybe there would be a need for like another $3 million or some not small amount of money. And I had sent emails to DCR and others to try and get some of those additional funds, because I think we'd all like to have a great new renovated park, curb to curb, everything. And I didn't know what additional funds are needed still to really do the whole thing. Yeah, that's all. So
no, I think those are good questions, Karen. And there is a portion of the project, and Kyle might be better to talk through this. There is a portion of those connections, some of the crosswalks that you're talking about, some of the curb ramps that will be done as part of our project, because there are, in order to make the Boston Parks portion of the project accessible, we have to cross the DCR property to get there. So there are a portion of those that we are doing as part of our project because we have to. And the other portion, we have been talking to DCR as well, in terms of, gee, wouldn't that be nice if it were all done at the same time? And I know that they were looking at some funds that they might have. And so we are continuing to push that conversation. So if you want to continue pushing it too, that's fantastic. In terms of what that value is, Kyle, do you remember the last time we did a cost estimate of what that additional DCR funding would need to be?
I think it was in the $2 to $3 million range. So
Yeah.
I think Karen is remembering that right.
Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Lauren, I'd love to work with you offline on that to try and, get that all in the project. There are trails, grants, and other things. I know we're supposed to be talking about bridges and we're talking about the paths, so I'm going to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But they connect to the bridge, Karen. So it's all related. Richard, hi, thank you. Are you able to unmute?
I think I am.
Hi,
yes, I was
perfect.
just
We
going to
can
say
hear you.
I put my comments on the bridges in. It seems like there's some consensus on concept 2, but since we're talking about paths and bicycles and pedestrians, I thought I had to contribute my 2 cents, which is chiefly that the Forsyth Way Jersey Street corridor is going to be a corridor for pedestrians and bicycles. I pass through it some days twice a day, and it's a design question. not to me, it's not a question of, stopping bicyclists from going through or people on scooters, because it's not going to happen. So how do we design, particularly that crossing, I think, is the issue. Right now, that piece is a terrible mess, that asphalt that goes from the bridge to Jersey Street. But so that is my point. And I'll reiterate the point that concept 2 on the bridges is great. It really looks nice, and redoing and restoring landscaping at either end, I presume should be part of the budget, or should be part of the path project, or should be part of somebody's budget. And I apologize for having to leave, but thanks for the designs, and thanks for another opportunity for feedback.
No, thank you. And I appreciate the comments. And the one thing I do just want to mention with concept 2, it's one of the things that Boston Parks has had conversations with Miguel about as well, is the one concern that Boston Parks has. We also agree. We love all of them for different reasons. But the one concern that Boston Parks has about concept 2 is the concern about potential homeless under that edge. That's more open in a way that the other 2 aren't. So we have talked to Miguel about, what could we do to combat that? And so we are looking at that as well. But I feel like I'd be remiss in not mentioning that is something that, as a design would progress, we would need to seriously look at how that could protect from that concern. Just because you brought up the kind of consensus on 2, I just wanted to throw that out there. So thank you. I appreciate that, Richard. Sarah, I think you are next on there, or it looks like it in my order. I don't know. Can you unmute, Sarah?
I think I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I want to second some of the bike comments that I hope we don't make bicyclists feel totally second-class citizens. So, for example, I confess that for decades, I worked at Landmark Center, and I would bike once the visitor center for the Conservancy was in the stone gatehouses. I would bike through the fence and had no idea I wasn't supposed to. So somehow signage about behavior expectations, I think, is important, but also consideration of what if someone who is a cyclist wants to visit the Rose Garden or meet a friend for a picnic. Is there going to be parking somewhere, or options for how to leave your bike and walk the rest of the way?
Yes, absolutely. Bike racks are definitely something that's in the plan. And we're looking at those strategically in terms of where some of those bike corridors are, where some of that would be coming in. And that's where there will be some good signage about, walking your bike or welcoming still people using their bikes and parking them at some of those key locations that people do like to come.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Steve, let's see. Are you able to unmute? Oh, there we are. Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. So first of all, I apologize for tuning in late. I do not have the orange line shut down as an excuse. I just forgot. But as I'm sure some people will expect, I have a couple of thoughts about the cycling issue. To me, the bigger concern is going to be motorized motorbikes, the food delivery guys who have taken over the sidewalks in the last year in the bike lanes and really are kind of running roughshod. I mean, compared to them, the bicyclists are like a 1% threat safety-wise. I also would encourage you to make sure that there are actually some database-based reporting on actual incidents between cyclists and pedestrians. I often feel that people flinch when I come by them on my bicycle, just because they're not expecting me. That I think kind of edges into I feel unsafe. And it's really, I think, the element of surprise. It's partly on me for not ringing my bell when I come up, but I think it's also just people felt surprised, and that's sort of the thing they carry away from those interactions. I actually don't think that I see. I'm not saying all cyclists are completely innocent, but I don't see a lot of reckless bicycle use in the park. And they're clearly, I'm one of them. I did not know until this process that we were not supposed to ride across the park. So this is actually kind of a long wind up to a pitch. I actually think one way that we might think about solving this is designating one or two of these paths for bike that allow bicycle access, complete with different paving or striping or something that makes them visually distinctive from the other pathways in the park. And I think then you could really, really expect more compliance from the bicyclists. I can't speak for the people on scooters because I think they tend to be students and people in their 20s who are kind of just doing their own little show. And again, I do think the real safety issue, I think, is from these motorized food delivery people. I will also just quickly say on the bridges, I'm not going to weigh in on a particular one, but with all due respect to Marie, I think sometimes in Boston we get so bollocksed up with making things historic looking that I think the city ends up losing some really great design possibilities as a result of that. And Miguel, I think, if I'm not correct, didn't your firm or you design the Fanny Appleton Bridge on the Esplanade? Is that correct? I mean, I think that is a very modern design, and I think it works beautifully there. And I just would cast a vote for not boxing ourselves into sort of a strictly historical view. I don't think any of these three would feel like a Frederick Law Olmsted design, although design number 3 has the cross hatching, which does call back to some of the older wooden bridges historically over the Muddy River. So I would just make a pitch for not painting ourselves into the corner of historical accuracy and losing, as a result of that, some really promising. I mean, if we had something like the Fanny Appleton Bridge, and I think these fall into that same aesthetic, I think they would be beautiful additions to the landscape. Oh, that's it.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate all of the comments. Thank you. Karen.
Only talking so much because I don't see other people's hands, but I appreciate what Steve is saying, and I actually think we need to remember that the old wooden bridge was not Olmsted. Actually, when in Olmsted's time, that whole area was much waterier, and the fields and other things got added to that area. And I think what's really interesting, I don't know of a wooden bridge that Olmsted designed. What I know that he had a very strong working relationship with H.H. Richardson, and he designed a lot of stone bridges with these sort of curves. And so for whatever reason, like I actually feel like number 1 and number 2 sort of are more in dialogue with the Olmsted Richardson legacy in some respect, which is like curved and sort of, and I don't know what that means in terms of color and and all of those things, but so that's, and I also think that he did believe in curves. He said nature abhorred a straight line, and he also liked things that seemed to touch and disappear in the landscape. He didn't want to be distracted by flowers or cemetery monuments. And I think, I actually think there's something very lovely about how these really, I think, do try to fade into the landscape and be as thin as possible. And that's what's really, in some ways, nice about steel, right? I guess I'm pretending to be a bridge designer. I'm not, so I'm going to stop faking it. But I think there's something very, very light and thin about a lot of these. And I think it takes a very confident designer to not try and make something flashy and enormous. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
But I think the bridges also should reflect the context, and that's the context that I felt would be appropriate here, and that's why this design were done in this way. They tend to be bridges that are more self-effacing, not too strong. But I think they're also not boring either. I mean, they have a design philosophy behind them, and I think they could work well. And again, the issue of color, that's something that we can discuss later. If you wanted to recess or you wanted to stand out more, that's a possibility.
Thank you. Marie, are you able to unmute?
I am. I guess I just wanted to say I didn't mean to imply that we had to follow any particular historic precedent in this bridge. I think what I said was I was curious to know what Elena thought, having secured some of the funding for this, and that I did enjoy that kind of round look, which I like just for the arch. I think it's elegant, but it also is reflected in a bunch of the other bridges in the area. But again, I think that they are all beautiful, and I really did want to hear what everyone else said. And I think we're asked for our preference, and I was leaning toward 2 and 3, but really happy with any of them, and wanted to go with what the community thought too. Thanks.
Thanks, Marie. Where did my mouse go? Okay, trying to get up to Sarah. Sarah, can you unmute?
I think so. Can you
There we
hear
go.
me?
Yes, we can.
One other quick question. Sorry, I didn't think of this sooner. On the mention of clearing vegetation and tree impacts, I've missed a meeting earlier. I don't know if you've shared numbers. Can anyone provide more detail about that?
Sorry, help. Numbers for what? Sorry, Sarah.
Oh, sorry, I'm driving. Maybe
No,
the
it's okay.
sound was bad. Tree impacts.
Oh, for the
Mr.
pathways?
Rosales mentioned clearing vegetation.
Okay, so are you saying for the pathways or the bridge in particular?
The bridge. Well, I guess both, but I meant the
Okay.
bridge.
Okay, Kyle, are you able to speak to that?
Yes, I think, we're only at a conceptual stage. We do know that, trees have grown in since the original bridge was removed. So there are some trees that would have to be removed just to install the bridge in the width that's proposed. We haven't identified which ones or how many at this point, but that's something we're going to have to look at as we get a little further along.
Thank you.
I mean, I think in the vicinity of the bridge, there is no large trees, like large caliper trees. So, that's helpful, but you need to have a little bit of a corridor around the construction. So, that could be planned later, but there had to be some space, to be able to build the structure.
Karen, are you able to unmute?
I am. I'm still talking. Oh my God. But the meeting is until 7:30. You guys got to raise your hands. He's up all the time, so you don't have to hear more from me. I wanted to say, and I do want to give a special thank you to Elena Saporta, Joanne Robinson, both members of the Park Advisors. For a couple of years, we worked together to apply for the city CPA, Community Preservation Act funding, and I think that this design is coming through that funding. I think, Lauren, was it 650,000 that was received, and that is being managed by the Parks Department. I know Elena has been involved in that, and I just wanted to say thank you guys, because getting this bridge back is going to be so important, and I do want to continue to work with you guys with whatever the community likes the best, and so we can try and fundraise and do this. I think it's going to be a lot for connections throughout this area, and I would love to hear Joanne and Elena's thoughts on this. They've definitely been living with and working on this for years too, but we'll hear if they have any thoughts. Thank you.
Allison, your hand's up.
Yes, hi. Sorry to be bringing up something slightly different, but
Okay.
it was mentioned that borings had been already done, and I just wondered what that was about, what you found and where you did them and why. And also the remaining pieces of the old bridge are out now, I thought, but maybe they're not all maybe there's something still there. So those are my two questions.
Perfect. Kyle, can you talk through the borings? I know we just got some of the results back.
Yep. We had geotechnical boring contractor do a boring on each end of where any bridge option would happen. And we had a geotechnical engineer there observing to record the different strata for each. And basically Miguel had asked so that when we get into later design phases, they can think about how a foundation would be designed. It's necessary to know what the soil profile is. And in this part of the Back Bay, we've seen it from projects, building projects particularly, there's a organic layer and then a thick clay layer before you hit bedrock. And we wanted to confirm that. So we went down and hit a glacial till layer at 180 feet. So there's a good 150 feet of clay there and probably 10 to 15 feet of organics on top of that. Oh, and then the other question was the parts of the bridge, the old bridge. The parts of the bridge that were in the river channel were removed. There are some remnants of the abutments still in the river, some rebar, concrete, and some wood sheeting. The concrete abutments are up the bank, but all that would be removed as part of the bridge preparation or construction.
Thank you, Kyle. We do have a couple more minutes if anybody has any questions. Also happy to give people back 10 minutes if there aren't any other questions. Anybody else? Oh, Steve. Yes, hey.
Two quick questions. Kyle, just to clarify, the foundations need to hit the bedrock. Is that correct? In order to be,
I think
they can't sit in the clay.
I think Miguel's probably better to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that depending on the concept, the loads are going to be different, and the foundation are going to be different. So first we need to decide on the concept, and then we'll be able to be better informed about the foundations. But the borings were exploratory in nature, and they're very helpful. But at this moment, we don't have the details of the foundations yet.
So I did have one quick other question, which might be for Lauren. Outside of that 650,000, I know that you said there's not a really hard estimate or a reliable estimate until the drawings or the 30% drawings are finished. Do we have some ballpark idea? Is this
Yes. So
$3 million job or a $30 million job?
No, neither actually. So what Miguel was asked to design to is 1.2 million.
Oh.
So each of these are in the 1.2 million. One of them is right at, one's a little tiny bit less, and one's a little bit more. So they're all right in that 1.2 ballpark.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Genevieve, are you, there you go.
Hi. I just had a quick question, actually, not about the bridges, but about the Back Bay pathway project. So I might have missed this, and I feel like I went to a couple of meetings, I guess in 2023, and they were quite detailed with a lot of different aspects and showing different design options for different areas. So I might have missed a meeting in between. Is there a project page? Two questions. One, is there a project page with the final designs for all these different aspects? And two, when is this project supposed to start? Thank you.
No, that's great questions. And it also is a good reminder that I forgot to put the project webpage in the chat like I promised I would at the beginning of the meeting. So I'm going to do that right now. So the project page is on here. all of the meetings that we have had, the presentations are on there, including the most recent one, which would have the most recent versions of the drawings. So that is all there. So I just added that into the chat for everyone. Sorry, did that answer all of the questions or did I miss one?
Well, the status in general. So
Status in general, thank you.
we'll have submit our permit applications to Boston Landmarks and the Conservation Commission this fall. And the anticipation is we'd get approval from them, but also we've already submitted to Boston Water and Sewer, which takes multiple months to get approval. We would be ready to have our drawings complete and go out to bid this winter with the hopes that we'd be in construction early 2025, spring, early summer, something like that.
Exactly. And I think one of the things to bring up too, and Kyle will talk more through this, is that like I think it was Karen had mentioned, or maybe it was Marie, there's so much construction that's happened in so much of the park. So one of the things is that when we're bidding it, we're going to try to be really respectful of not trying to shut everything down at one time, so that parts of the park can still be used, but also not breaking it up into so many parts that it just continues to drag on. So once we finalize a lot of those drawings, we'll also be looking at some of the phasing, and we can also share that at one of those future meetings too. Let's see. Are we able to let June, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, unmute?
Hey, Lauren, thank you so much. Yeah, it's just my name is Jun Lee. I'm also
Okay, thank you.
the engagement and policy manager at the Conservancy. This is really exciting to be in this meeting and just to hear about this concept. I was just wondering to Miguel, what makes the bridges have different price tags? Is it just like the amount of steel that is used, or is it? But yeah, I guess that's like my main question.
Yeah, basically because these bridges are mostly steel, I would say that the amount of steel material is the main driver of the cost. But also the concrete, but I would say in this case probably the steel. But what we do is that when we do the structural calculations, we can quantify all the different materials, and that's what they use to the cost estimate, and that comes from the from the computer software. So that's a good, effective way to do a fairly accurate cost estimate.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised or any other comments. But I do just want to say thank you to everybody. Really appreciate the input. And as soon as we know when our next meeting is going to be, either for the pathways or the bridge, I'll go ahead and send that information out. And I should have everybody's email address from the registration for this. So hopefully we'll be back in touch sometime soon. And I really appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.